Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be back, and I think we're going to have a tremendous panel. It's a good follow-up to what Jay's just been talking about. The title is actually The Edge of Wildness, not wilderness, but I'm sure we'll talk about wilderness. But without further ado, let me introduce the panel. It's actually, we just worked it out, that you've got 3 South Africans and an Italian, so apologies about that. But here we go. First up, Luca Franco. Luca's the CEO and founder of Luxury Frontiers. Luca? He's the Italian. Come on. Benvenuto. Amici.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
But I dress like a South African.
Yeah, he is actually. South Africans, you can't get them to dress properly. Let's see what happens next. Next up, Adrian Gardiner, chairman and founder of the Mantis collection. Adrian, all the way from Port Elizabeth. Well, actually, all the way from Zambia, right? Via Port Elizabeth. Oh, you did the zip line. Did you? Have a seat. And finally, actually traveled the furthest distance, probably geographically, James McBride, one of the partners and the CEO of NIHI Sumber in Indonesia. James. Good, we got the photos up. Nice to have you with us.
Nice to be here, thank you.
Classically elegant, as always. Right, so the theme here is adventure, tourism concepts, the edge of wildness. I think we've got 3 folks who really know a lot about this. And I thought I'd start with you, Luca, because I didn't tell you I'd start with you, just to keep you on your toes. So you founded Luxury Frontiers, and that's focused really exclusively on what is sort of a current driving trend, I guess, in our industry, which is this sort of move towards the experience. Experiential is a core part of that, and I'm sure you'll explain exactly what that is. But tell us what Luxury Frontiers actually does. What is it that you do for your clients?
Salam alaikum, and thank you, Jonathan and Nick, first of all. Luxury Frontiers is a design firm. We design and develop luxury, experiential, alternative, eco-sensitive resorts, camps, eco-lodges. And we do a lot of tent camps, tree houses, etc., especially in Africa, but outside of Africa. And everything that we do is about create a turnkey solution for the landowner, the hotel operator, in a very holistic way, from experiential operation aspect, integrating to the design, and then full design and development solution.
Luca, how do you talk about experiential? We've heard this word several times over the last day and a half. What does it actually mean? What do you mean by experiential? What is it that actually means?
Yeah, experiential, it's not just a trend, experiential travel trend. It became a consumer behavior cultural shift. And it's here to stay, and it will grow exponentially, and it's growing exponentially. So experiential people now are looking for memorable, authentic, engaging, enriching experiences with local touch and the personalized touch. And I see is experiential travel is about pushing your self-confidence boundaries, your comfort zones to over the limits, your limits of emotional, physical, psychological limits, and creating an amazing sense of accomplishment for the guests. So, but what also is experiential is moving towards to more transformational travel, where it's more inbound versus just outbound, and that is I think is a new phase of experiential travel.
So James, maybe I'll just pick up from what Luke is saying there. I mean, pushing your limits and your boundaries. I mean, one of the things that's quite striking about what you've done at NIHI Sumber, obviously, and for those of you who don't know NIHI Sumber, it's a fabulous resort in Indonesia, which James will probably explain more about. But one of the things that I noticed that you can do is learn how to surf, and that's a big break off the island. In fact, it's I'm not a surfer, but
Sure.
I understand it's one of the biggest and most, interesting breaks from a surfer's perspective. And you actually managed to sort of use that as a hook. And the whole Edge of Wildness hook that you use, why did you think that would work? Why did you think, you and Chris obviously must have talked about that, seen the beach, looked at the water and said, wow, we can get people here, but it's not as easy as that, right? How did you actually put it together?
I think we were just very lucky.
Lucky. Better to be lucky than
Yeah,
right.
no, I was always in the corporate world for many, many years, and my partner, Chris Birch, called me in Singapore when I was the president of YTL and said that there's this remote surf camp on the island of Sumba that's for sale. Where is Sumba? You're all asking yourself the same question in the audience. You can Google it and you'll see it's an island 50 minutes east of Bali that's 2.5 times bigger than Bali, the size of Jamaica, and it was the only resort on the island which was a surf camp. And it was a surf camp because it's got the only private wave in the world. It's got a left, and through the relationship with the government, we were able to keep it private and only let 10 people on the wave. And it was dramatically beautiful. I am South African, as you can hear, and we instinctively felt it could become something special. Acquired it, and we're dabbling in the beginning, and in 2013 really put ourselves in it. Invested a lot of money, and the results have sort of speak for themselves now.
Well, you won Hotel of the World 2 years running, right?
Travel + Leisure #1 hotel in the world 2 years in a row, which we were very, very delighted about. Helped us tremendously, and helped the people of Sumba, as we are philanthropic. We raise a lot of money for many great causes in Sumba, almost $1 million a year, which is funded through our guests.
How many guests can you actually have on site at any one time?
We have 33 villas, and so the maximum is 85 people. We run 73% occupancy, rate north of $1,500 a night.
So it's not often you hear someone standing on stage saying they, took a surf camp and made it the #1 hotel in the world. It's pretty phenomenal. Adrian, you obviously, I guess, conservation is probably the theme that we should pick up with you most. You've won several awards. It runs through your blood. Tell us about, because you went through a similar experience, I guess, with Shamwari. When you took a sort of 2,000 hectare, I think it was, bit of land next to Port Elizabeth, a part of South Africa, by the way, that was not particularly known for anything to do with wildlife or game reserves, and created the start and the ethos that sort of is now today Mantis. I mean, there's obviously a common theme here. You folks are looking at things that other people pass by, or creating things with essentially nothing to start with, except maybe a wonderful piece of land.
Well, thank you for that question, and I just want to embrace what you said, and I'll come back to that at the end, is that, community involvement, I think, is a key to what we all should be doing going forward. But just to give you a little bit of background of that, it was, in fact, 1,200 hectares, which ended up at 20,000 hectares, and it was drought-ravaged, degraded, and abused land. But when I read up all the history about what was there, we soon realized that if I could put back what was there, which in fact was a bigger spread of species than perhaps our Kruger Park has, I started on that mission. And I think testimony to what our team has done there is that after having been told that it was a complete waste of time and would never work, which I'm sure you had the same experience, there are 16 similar projects in the Eastern Cape now of South Africa, and it is definitely a wildlife destination. So through that, my life experience was that I was very privileged to meet what I would consider to be the really leaders in conservation in this world. And in Africa, it was Dr. Ian Player, Gary Player's brother, who changed my life. Then I met Sir Lawrence van der Post. I met John Aspinall, with the gorillas. And then recently, Attenborough, David Attenborough. And it's just quite amazing when you meet those people and you get that encouragement. But I think that going forward is that what we've worked out in the last stage of my life is that to make these things work, we have to embrace the communities. Because if the communities don't realize what they can get out of conservation, I believe that conservation in the long term has a limited life. And can you imagine sort of Africa without one of our biggest assets, which is the Big Five? And if you just had to take that away from certain countries, I mean, if you took the migration away, what would happen to tourism there? If you took wildlife out of South Africa, what would happen to our tourism? So, you know, we've taken this very seriously. And I just listened to what you said there, and it really resonated with me that you managed to raise $1 million out of the customers that come to your place for what you stand for.
Yeah.
So what we did when I did my deal with Accor, one of the most important things that we did there was to say to them is that I wanted to start a community conservation fund. We want our brand, Mantis, to be the leading hospitality brand in conservation, but attached to the community. So we've also started a fund. And the way I want to raise money from that fund is leveraging their loyalty program. You know, they have a loyalty program of 100 million people. So, you know, quite casually, I asked Sebastian, who we heard yesterday, I want $1 a person from those members. You know, so that's the sort of thing we're doing, a lot of cause marketing. We're very involved in that. And I want to raise real money. And just, you know, briefly this morning, when I went to look at the site yesterday where we're going to put a tented camp, there's a community involvement there. There's still farming going on there. There's a great history going on there. We need to acknowledge that. We need to embrace it. And tourism is about adventure, travel into the future, and experiential, just like you do and what you stand for. So that's where we are at the moment in our lives. And we really want to embrace that. And it's not something that Accor and Mantis have started. We would like every hotel group in the world to be involved in some way or another in doing this. And we don't implement. What we did for the first time, we got aligned different NGOs, because we don't want NGOs working apart from each other. So we will provide the funds for what we think is their project, or if somebody brings us a project, and ask others to implement. So if we came here to save the Arabian leopard, we would look for somebody here to do it. We don't want to come and do it, but we want to get the funds, we want to get the people to help do that.
Well, do you want to just add something to that, James? I get the sense that you...
I think the key thing in Sumba, in some wild places in the world, the philanthropic part and taking care of the local community, in Sumba's case, was pure survival. Pure survival is the people still to this day wear swords. It's an animist culture. It's very tribal and actually can be very dangerous. And if you open opulent businesses and you have people living one way and those living in poverty or dying from malaria, not having water, it's impossible to coexist. Your business will be destroyed. So to coexist, it becomes an essential, vital part of being able to do that. And I think the other thing that we always wrestle with is every Saturday night we show the Sumba Foundation video. And it can be a little gruesome, it can be a little sad, as it involves people that are not well. And in the luxury segment, you do have a little bit of push and pull as to where a very, very small percentage may say, I don't pay all of this money to have this put in front of me. But it is such an important part of our ethos and what we do that we always push forward, and we'll never change that ethos, as it's what that cohabitation of the two is vital to our success.
So one of the things, Adrian, that you just touched on there is obviously wildlife, which is, you know, I'm always surprised that governments don't regard wildlife, as you pointed out. If it's not there, it's fairly fundamental that, you know, a certain proportion of the visitors to the country are probably not going to go. It's part of the physical infrastructure of a country, in the same way that you have to have airports and roads and the ability to move around. Luca, let me ask you a question. We're hearing a lot about sustainability, conservation. Can it actually be profitable in your view?
Yeah, I think sustainability is profitable. I think it's about yeah, it's one is, first of all, is guests, our travelers are much more savvy, educated, and they select, they make a choice where to go and where to stay at based on sustainability considerations. And so have a sustainable project, sustainable operation allows to have more guests eventually, and there are more revenues. But also, in terms of, there is a real opportunity for optimize resources and reduce waste, optimize waste management, reduce energy consumption. And so there are really good opportunities to cost reduction. And then the third aspect, I think, is about people and staff in these organizations that are very meaningful to, they're really meaning, and it's not just about marketing gig, wash. Where people and staff are really proud and passionate to be part of a meaningful organization that can contribute, that is contributing to land preservation, wildlife conservation, and community uplift. And this by itself is a payout. And that means there is a higher retention, staff retention, and much more productivity. And really, ultimately, all of that goes back to the community and is appreciated as well by the guests. So ultimately is high yield, low impact, and high touches. So less guests, less impact, and pay higher ticket.
James, am I right in thinking that you have that you're actually averse to ecotourism in the sense of, firstly, am I quoting you correctly? And secondly, can you just say what you mean by that?
I should say what I usually say about ecotourism, but I can't use profanity. I'm not a big believer in ecotourism. I think that eco is a loosely used word that has been, too many people have jumped on the bandwagon of eco to give you as I would say, a shitty shower, terrible sheets, no air conditioning. And everyone is on that bandwagon of where I'm a believer in responsibility. I'm a believer in responsibility to the community that you're doing business in, and the responsibility to your customer, and ultimately responsibility to yourself. I think eco is shallow, skin deep, and if you really delve into it, of having a card next to your bed, of not changing the towels or hanging them up, it's just not meaningful in today's world. I think everything is much deeper than that, and you need to be responsible to yourselves so that you can be successful.
And that, I guess, goes particularly to what you're doing with the community, right?
To the community, we, as I said, we raise close to $1 million a year. That's for the eradication of malaria. If you didn't, you should see David Beckham's post on his Instagram yesterday of the amount of people that actually die from malaria. It's probably the hugest curse in the world that exists today. So we've reduced from where two children out of 4 would die about 15 years ago in Sumba. We've taken it down to where there's 96% success rate. Providing potable water to children, educating children, and really just providing well-being in all of West Sumba has been powerful, and is a big part of the future stuff that we want to do, where we are working on developments in Costa Rica, Iceland, and in Mexico. Philanthropy is a key to success. It's a key to decision-making. And if I looked at the repeat guests coming back to NIHI Sumba, it's the children deciding, because they get engaged in certain pursuits, whether that be that their parents provided a water well, they want to see how the people have improved and how people's lives have as they grow up. They want to keep coming back, and it's been a very, very powerful initiative for us.
So just let me pick up on a theme here, because I'm quite intrigued in terms of how Chris approaches this. So your partner obviously is Chris Birch, who's a serial entrepreneur, hugely successful. When you looked at this camp with Chris, did Chris say, by the way, James, we need to make a profit?
No, we thought we'd lose $1 million a year.
And does he expect to make a profit now?
We're making a lot of profit.
So let it be lucky than right.
It's been very, very successful. And I really lay a lot of that down to it, because if you get two creative people, obviously I'm a hotel person, we both have become entrepreneurs and didn't look at it. We didn't have a master plan. We didn't go through it in every single way. We created it emotionally. If we didn't like something, we knocked it down, and we built a place that really works, and it thrives in its environment. And it struck a chord, because this type of travel is just very, very relevant today. Hence we get a lot of calls to do other NIHIs, and hopefully are expanding the brand in other parts of the world with our key model. And I think very important, I've spoken too much, is I hate vanilla experiences. Vanilla is boring to me. If I have two couples having dinner everywhere, we have failed. I want people to dance on the bar. I want people to live life, swim naked, and just truly have fun. There's no fun left in the world. Everything is very generic. Do good, but have fun. That's it.
I like it. Do good, have fun. Adrian, I mean, what you've done with Mantis is a sort of underlying theme, save the world as well? Is there a community philanthropic element. I mean, you've assembled close to 30 properties now in the Mantis collection. How did you do that? How did you assemble that group of hotels? Because firstly, you did it in a relatively short space of time, and secondly, they're all entirely unique.
Well, I think that's probably what intrigued Accor, but just to add again what James said, if you do well, you should be able to do good. So, I'm very pleased that he's making the $1 million, because it's a lot easier to do good if you do well, because otherwise there's a limit. And I think that that's a philosophy we have. We want to do well. We want to make profit out of it, but we want to share it, not only with our employees, but in creating. Just to give you an example, all those farms that we put together with Shamwari employed 14 people. At its peak, we employed 340 people. That's without the multiplier effect. So my background is certainly not hospitality or anything. This all came by accident because of my upbringing in Zimbabwe, where I was involved, my dad, in cattle ranching, and I was exposed to wildlife. And I always wanted my patch of Africa, like I think all of us sitting on this stage do. And, that was when I got it. I wanted it to be close to home, where I lived in Port Elizabeth, that I could go there. And in fact, when I started, I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning, go and set the plan out, then go back to the office. So, how did the brand grow? And I think that my experience in growing a brand is get endorsement. In other words, I want people to endorse what we're doing. And so, as I mentioned before, we had these great conservationists who endorsed my work, and that sort of started it. Then we got the Born Free involved, where we closed down the whole Born Free Centre in the UK and put it in Africa, where it should have been. So that was also a great brand builder for us. Then, I was approached by the normal brands. I must be quite honest with you, with the world-leading brands who wanted to put their brand on us. For example, Preferred, Relais Chateau, and those sort of what I call badging brands. And I always said to myself, no, let me try and create our own brand. Let me invest my money in creating our own brand. So we did that by creating, when I worked out how the people came to South, everybody went to Cape Town. 90% of those went to a game reserve. So we had Cape Town, we had something in the middle, and we had about 5 properties. Then that's when we came to the idea of creating our own brand. And just quickly, I want to tell you how we got to the Mantis collection. It's through the praying mantis. And Ian Player he's staying with me, came to breakfast in the morning. He said, you achieved 2 things. You kept me awake all night, but I've got your brand. And he thought about the people who had influence in his life, were Sir Lawrence van der Post and Mkubu Mtumbela, his guide. But they were never scared, because Sir Lawrence was very involved in the Bushmen. He was or the Sand People. The Sand People were never scared of that praying mantis. They called it their god, because they could see and hear it. So he said, call it the Mantis Collection, because you empower, and we heard yesterday, your general managers, your people who run your hotels, to do the job for you with the sufficient training. Then we took that to mean man and nature together is sustainable. But how we spread that brand, we decided to go to people to say, this is our ethic. Can we badge your hotel? So, for example, we got the Sherry Netherland in New York, the best boutique there. We got the Kepler in Paris. We got our own in London, but we went around the world to try and get these. So we've created about 90 brands, of which we have ownership in just short of 30 of those, and we manage further. So now to spread that whole thing, we needed our loyalty program, and we needed the booking system. That's why we went with Accor. So they don't own any of our properties. They own half of our management company and half of our brand. And that's already, in 1 year that we've been married, has had exceptional transformation for us. But the most important thing is it's got to be involved with benefiting the community and conservation, because that's what we stand for, and that's what we think the world will lose if we don't start looking at it. And we saw all about plastic today. We've seen a lot of things that have been very good here. We want to endorse those things and implement them.
Well, you've certainly got Sebastian on the same page, because firstly he's and has been for ages, a huge fan of Africa, but also, he's now talking about literally talking about making the world a better place, and he specifically references you every time he talks about that. So,
well, every time I meet him, I talk about it, so I want him to reference.
Yeah, I can imagine he's getting a lot of feedback.
Thank you.
Luca, I think it was Bloomberg that recently said that tented camps are now the world's #1, sort of desired experience at the end of a travel decision. I mean, you're obviously in the business of helping people create that. Is there going to be a point at which it becomes everyone's got a tent at camp. You can go anywhere, and there's someone who's put a few tents up. Does it become devalued at a certain point?
That's an interesting question, because just in US there is this glamping. I mean, glamping is all over, but specifically in US, a report came out and they say that the glamping industry will be up to $1 billion by 2023, but of which 95–98% of this is between 2 mom and pops to 4-star. We try to we target only 5-star, 6-star, but it's not about the product that is for granted. It's really about the product can be 4-star, 5-star. It's really about the experiences, about the meaningful experiential journey that you can have around the tents. It's not about the tents. It's really about responsibility, about philanthropy. It's about create an environment that helps to go back to nature, that helps the guests to have to find themselves, to connect with themselves, disconnect from the technology, everyday world, and connect with themselves, with the nature, and with the family and friends. So it's much more than tents. And we do a lot of tents because now that's what the market likes. But we wanted to think out of the box to the next thing. And for us, it's a very holistic approach.
I'm just going to ask someone to tell me how much time we've got left, because we obviously started late and we don't have a countdown. How much do we have? We're finished? Well, that's just as well, isn't it?
Well,
I just wanted to, on that note, thank my panel for joining us. I'm sure we could carry on talking for another hour or so, but it's been a great pleasure having you all on stage, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please thank the panelists.
Thank you.
Adrian?
Thanks, James.